couple of housekeeping notes. We just ask that you stay muted until our Q&A session begins following the presentation. And just wanted to let you know we are recording today's presentation. The recording will be made available to anybody that would like one. You just need to reach out to us. So take it away, guys. I'm going to jump off here and hand it over to Shane and Keith.
Right on. Thanks, Claire. And hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us and taking the time. We are going to go through a little bit of background with Protocol 19, whether you're familiar or not, and then we'll just jump right into the short and sweet of it, what we're hoping to get from the ministry in terms of anticipated relief for some of the challenges we've had using Protocol 19. So let's get into it. Yeah, when you are trying to figure out whether you follow Protocol 19 or not, the main question to be asking is that does your site or did your site ever have a Schedule 2 activity? If the answer is no, then you take the route of the intended disposal facilities requirements. They can be a little different from Protocol 19. And if the answer is yes, then you fall into those regulations, and we'll get into just a little bit of that here. So if Protocol 19 applies, then you've got to do your soil testing, and that's volume dependent. After you've got your soil data, you may have to do some vapor testing, and that usually depends on certain compounds and contaminants being present in that soil data. Once you've got all your information, you fill out your form that gets submitted to the ministry, and then you have that 1 week waiting period from submission to when you can ship that soil. So those hopeful, helpful changes coming this summer, hopefully. And yeah, by then it will have been over a year, but we're almost at a year of having dealt with Protocol 19 here. The industry has been pretty vocal about the challenges that they've faced, and luckily the ministry's been also pretty receptive to those. So they've gone back to their drawing board, come up with some hopeful relief that they will announce, and that has to do with these 6 or so items that we'll get into in the next slides. Starting with ministry certified sites. These are those sites that have, as an example, a certificate of compliance, having done usually pretty detailed testing, having had those arm's length reviews by CSAP Society, by the ministry, ideally getting to the end and getting that certification document showing that you've done the work, you've collected some data, and you know a pretty good amount about your site. Those sites right now, as it stands, get triggered into Protocol 19 testing, which can be pretty redundant if they have to go back, remobilize, drill again, test again, adding costs, adding timeline delays. So hopefully the ministry will clear up whether that applies, so long as you can show that your site doesn't have any new source of contamination. Getting into temporary soil storage sites, those are those municipal works yards or soil transfer sites. Often they have Schedule 2 activities on them or are considered a Schedule 2 activity themselves, but are storing temporarily that clean soil. So if they can show that it's clean, it's been tested, it's come onto their site, it stays there for a little bit and then leaves again, they can show that good chain of custody and that it hasn't had the chance to mix with potentially other contaminated soil or been impacted by the Schedule 2 activity on site. There's some hopeful relief that they won't get triggered into Protocol 19. The relief associated to soil treatment facilities, maybe not as applicable to our listeners today, but I'll just touch on it briefly. So if you're a soil treatment facility, you're usually permitted already. You've got certain requirements and regulations that you have to meet aside from Protocol 19. But given that you are a Schedule 2 activity, they would get triggered into that Protocol 19, which also a little bit redundant, doubling up on those testing efforts and costs and timelines. So hopeful relief coming to those facilities, not having to duplicate their efforts. And with that, I'll pass it off to Keith.
Awesome. Thanks, Shay. Yes, I'll take over and talk a little bit about the expected changes to the soil analytical requirements. So this is one that's expected to carry quite a positive change for most listeners on the call today. Currently, the province has legislated a lot of the contaminants we need to test at all sites and leave pretty little room for qualified professionals to consider, the specific details of the site. This has resulted in some impractical sampling situations. One specific instance that comes to mind is maybe where you have a lot of sampling data for a site that indicates, most of the contaminants are limited to the top 10 feet of the site. That's sort of the impacted area. If a developer now comes along and wants to redevelop that site with underground parking, currently we still need to test all of those deeper soils for the potential contaminants related to the surface activity, despite them likely not being 30 feet down. So this has resulted in a lot of redundant sort of sampling requirements, and it's hopefully something that can be addressed with these next round of changes. The next situation that did not make much sense was having to test soils within an untouched area of like a larger site. So this is an example of this where there may be a Schedule 2 activity, let's call it an automotive repair, identified by the blue square here. Since this is all one legal parcel with a Schedule 2 activity occurring on the site, we still need to test for automotive contaminants within a lot of these untouched areas around here if soil's being moved from there. So again, this is resulting in kind of a lot of redundant sampling, and I think most people can look at it and be like, we're not going to find, waste oil contaminants within the forested area here. The next form of relief is expected to be for amalgamated parcels. So an example has been provided here where maybe there's an automotive repair within the eastern commercial part of this property, which has been combined with these adjacent residential properties to facilitate kind of a larger development. Once combined, technically a Schedule 2 has occurred on the property. So the residential portions, which make up close to 2/3 of the site area, would now be subject to the same testing requirements as that commercial Schedule 2 part. Again, this isn't something that made a ton of sense, and this will hopefully be cleaned up in these changes. The next one's related to soil vapor. This is an important one in that it can hopefully avoid a lot of clean soil being treated as contaminated due to the vapor results. So based on the current assessment framework, when vapor sampling is required, we're not allowed to apply any sort of attenuation factor. Without getting too technical on things, an attenuation factor is basically just a dilution factor. So if you have any contaminants in the soil, the vapor assessment, what we found is likely to fail if you can't apply any sort of relief or dilution factor to it, which has resulted in otherwise clean soil being treated as contaminated at significant cost. So this is a sensible change that will hopefully allow vapors to pass more easily in these soil assessments and keep more clean soil as clean. Also wanted to highlight the Ministry's Soil Relocation Information Tool. This is actually a pretty useful tool in that it's a central database to know how soil is moving throughout the province. I just included a quick screen grab here of the situation within the CRD. You can note the green circles show where soil is being moved, and the yellow circles indicate where soil is being generated from. Interestingly, since March 1st, 2023, when these regulations came into effect, there's been close to 39 million cubic meters of soil that have been moved from 242 sites within the CRD. In speaking with various stakeholders, not many people seem to be aware of this tool or use it very often. Most are just kind of shipping their soil to kind of the central disposal facilities. I think as soil movement continues to be tracked, so this will open up more options for where soil can be moved to potentially create more efficient disposal solutions for a particular project. If people are aware that a site is accepting, a certain quality of soil right down the street from their project, it's obviously more efficient to reach out to them and see if they have any use for this soil before you ship it to like a VMD or a Butler or something like that. So it'll be interesting to see how this develops, but in the short term, it's interesting to see where all the soil is going. And with that, just kind of short and sweet, summarize some key points here. So the changes are expected to be implemented for summer 2024 after a consultation period. Again, the anticipated changes would include relief for sites with existing ministry certifications, those temporary soil storage sites, the municipal yards, and the soil transfer stations. Soil treatment facilities, expecting a little bit more leniency for qualified professionals on the soil analysis requirements and contaminant selection, and also soil vapor assessments. So yeah, with that, we'll take any questions you guys may have. I've included our contact information there in case you want to reach out after the presentation or have a particular situation you want to discuss. Also included a link to Schedule 2 if you guys are interested in reviewing sort of the list of activities there, and also the Ministry of Soil Relocation website, which gives you access to that tool I was talking about. So yeah.
Thanks so much, Keith. Thanks, Shane. So if anybody has any questions, comments, feel free to unmute yourself and start asking away. Otherwise, you can pop a question into the chat box, and Keith and Shane are happy to field any of your concerns. So I'll just give you a moment there.
Yeah, Rebecca did have a question in the chat box. I see she's asking, how do you foresee these changes helping your projects moving forward as it relates to timelines and budgets? Obviously, this is a positive change. Normally, when there's ministry new regulations or what have you, they tend to be more restrictive and more cumbersome. But all of these things that we talked about today are going to make things easier, hopefully, and allow things to be completed more cost effectively. So yeah, overall net positive for people moving soil throughout the province.
That's great. Thanks, Keith. Any other comments from anyone? Oh, has there been any talk of relief for the quarried materials?
Yeah, I can jump in there with that one. For those unfamiliar with Protocol 19, if you are blasting rock for an excavation that's underneath a Schedule 2 activities, those dry cleaners, gas stations, automotive repair shops, you now have to test that rock for metal leaching and acid rock drainage. And there's a certain requirement now for volume. I believe it's 1 sample for every 2,000 cubic meters. And at least right now, the proposed change has to do with that testing per volume requirement. So likely the ministry is going to expand that volume. So maybe 1 sample will carry more volume in terms of that rock that you're hoping to ship off your site.
Yeah, and this would come from, obviously apply to like quarries themselves, because quarries generally have Schedule 2s on them. So that same sort of thing would apply to just most rock quarries.
Thanks, guys. Anybody else? Questions, comments, concerns? Good. Well, if nobody has any other thoughts, we're just going to end the presentation there today. Again, just wanted to thank everyone for your time this afternoon. If anybody has any project-specific questions, you can always reach out and chat to some of the team members one-on-one. If you want a recording of our presentation, again, please just reach out. We're happy to send that your way. Otherwise, again, thank you so much for your time, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for
Cool.
attending today.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Take care.